Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where every story is a journey that inspires and uplifts. Today, we bring you a powerful tale set in the parking lot of a busy grocery store, a moment that starts with misunderstanding but ends with a powerful lesson in humility and respect. Our protagonist, a disabled black veteran, becomes the target of unfounded accusations from a group of entitled individuals. But what begins as a confrontation soon takes an unexpected turn that will leave you reflecting on the dangers of judgment and the power of dignity. Stay with us as we unravel this compelling story of perseverance and justice. And remember, if you enjoy stories that make you think and stir your heart, be sure to leave a comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another impactful tale here on Hopeful Horizon. It was a bright, sunny afternoon when Daniel Wilson, a black veteran who had served 2 tours overseas, pulled into the parking lot of his local grocery store. His dark gray sedan bore a military sticker on the rear window, and hanging from his rearview mirror was a handicapped placard, both reminders of the sacrifice he had made for his country. Daniel had lost his right leg in combat, a devastating injury that left him with a prosthetic limb. His life had changed forever after that fateful day, but he adapted. He remained strong, calm, and kind-hearted, even when faced with the daily challenges his disability presented. As he parked in the designated disabled spot near the entrance of the store, Daniel took a deep breath. He wasn't the type to draw attention to himself, but parking close to the entrance helped him navigate the store more easily. His routine was simple: pick up a few grocery items and the medication he needed for his ongoing recovery. But as Daniel opened his car door and carefully maneuvered out, he felt a sense of unease wash over him. A group of 4 people stood just a few parking spaces away, staring at him with disdain. They were well-dressed, each holding iced coffees, their faces twisted in contempt. One of them, a tall man in sunglasses, leaned toward his friends and muttered something. They all laughed, glancing back at Daniel with mockery in their eyes. "Can you believe that guy?" the tall man said, loud enough for Daniel to hear. "Faking a disability just to get a good parking spot." Daniel tensed but tried to shake it off. He had experienced similar encounters before, people questioning the validity of his disability, or making snide remarks when they saw him walking with a slight limp but no visible signs of injury. His prosthetic leg was hidden under his pants, and to them, he probably looked too normal to be disabled. He'd learned to ignore it. Today would be no different, he told himself. As Daniel reached for his cane, the group's laughter grew louder. He caught fragments of their conversation. "I bet he's just pretending," a woman sneered. "Look at him, perfectly fine." "Probably one of those guys who buy a placard online," another one chimed in. Daniel clenched his jaw but kept his head down, choosing to ignore their words. He didn't owe them an explanation. He was there for groceries and nothing more. As he slowly made his way into the store, he could still hear their taunts behind him, but he forced himself to focus on his task. His military training had taught him discipline, both on and off the battlefield. The air-conditioned grocery store was a welcome reprieve from the hostile stares outside. Daniel's thoughts shifted to his shopping list, a few basics: milk, eggs, bread, and his medication for the pain in his leg. He moved through the aisles calmly, though the encounter outside lingered in his mind like a shadow. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. After gathering everything he needed, Daniel headed to the pharmacy to pick up his medication. The pharmacist greeted him with a warm smile, knowing him from his regular visits. With his items in hand, Daniel exited the store, relieved to be done with his errands. But as he approached his car, his relief turned to shock. Eggs, splatters of eggshells and yolk covered his windshield, hood, and even the side mirrors. His heart sank, and for a moment, he stood frozen, staring at the mess. The group from earlier stood across the lot, laughing and pointing at him like schoolyard bullies. They had done this. Without a doubt, they had vandalized his car simply because they assumed he was faking his disability. Daniel felt his blood boil. The anger and frustration he had suppressed earlier surged to the surface. But even in his anger, he took a deep breath, remembering the discipline he'd learned in the military. He wouldn't let this escalate out of control. Slowly, he made his way toward the group, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. He could feel the stares of other shoppers as they watched the situation unfold. The entitled group saw him coming, but showed no signs of remorse. In fact, the tall man stepped forward, a smirk plastered on his face. "Hey, old man," he called out, crossing his arms. "Looks like you got yourself a little car trouble. Maybe you shouldn't be parking in spots reserved for actual disabled people." Daniel stopped in front of them, his eyes narrowing. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The woman from the group shrugged, taking a sip from her iced coffee. "Because you're a fraud. You don't look disabled to me." The accusation cut deep, but Daniel refused to let them see how much it hurt. "You don't know anything about me," he said, his jaw clenched. "What you did here, this vandalism, is a crime." The tall man laughed, taking a step closer. "The only crime here is you pretending to be something you're not. You should be ashamed of yourself." Daniel's hand tightened around his cane. He felt the urge to yell, to let out the frustration that had been building inside him, but instead, he exhaled slowly, his voice calm. "I'm a veteran. I earned the right to park there." "Liar," the tall man spat. "I bet you don't even have a real placard." At that moment, Daniel heard the distant sound of sirens. One of the group members had called the police. This was far from over. The police car pulled into the parking lot, its lights flashing as two officers stepped out. The tall man immediately approached them, gesturing wildly toward Daniel. "This guy is faking a disability and parking in a handicapped spot," he said, his voice filled with self-righteousness. "He's trying to get away with it, and when we confronted him, he started threatening us." Daniel stood his ground as the officers approached him. One of them, a tall woman with a stern expression, stopped in front of him. "Sir," she said, "may I see your ID and handicap placard?" Daniel nodded, reaching into his wallet to hand over his military ID and showing the placard that hung from his rearview mirror. The officer examined them both, her expression unreadable. Meanwhile, the group continued to yell accusations, their voices blending together in a cacophony of lies. "Look at him," one of them shouted. "He's perfectly fine. He's scamming the system." Daniel, now feeling the weight of the eyes on him, felt the frustration bubbling to the surface. He looked the officer square in the eye. "I'm not faking anything," he said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and exhaustion. The officer, still holding his ID, glanced back at the group. "Everyone, calm down," she said. "We'll sort this out." But Daniel had had enough. He couldn't take the accusations anymore, the humiliation of having to prove his worth in front of a growing crowd. In one swift motion, he rolled up his right pant leg, revealing the sleek, metallic frame of his prosthetic. The parking lot fell silent. The moment Daniel revealed his prosthetic leg, the tone of the entire confrontation shifted. Gasps echoed from the growing crowd of onlookers, and even the entitled group went silent. The tall man's face turned pale, his smug expression fading as the reality of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. Daniel's voice trembled with emotion as he spoke. "You want to know why I park here? I lost my leg while serving this country. I don't need to justify myself to any of you." The officer, now fully aware of the truth, took a step back, her gaze shifting from Daniel to the group of entitled individuals who had started the confrontation. She handed Daniel back his ID with a look of quiet respect. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said softly. "We had no idea." Daniel didn't respond at first. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He'd spent years holding back his anger, choosing peace over confrontation. But today, these people had crossed the line. They had vandalized his car, insulted him, and questioned his very existence, all because they refused to believe that a man like him could be disabled. The crowd that had gathered began to murmur amongst themselves, sympathy and guilt spreading like wildfire. It was clear now that Daniel had been wronged and the entitled group had been out of line. But the confrontation wasn't over yet. One of the group members, a woman who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "We didn't know," she stammered. "We didn't mean any harm." Daniel shot her a cold look. "You didn't mean any harm? You egged my car. You insulted me. You tried to have me arrested for parking in a spot I earned." The officer turned toward the group, her face stern. This man has shown proof of his disability. What you did here is vandalism and harassment. The tall man, now looking desperate, tried to backtrack. We didn't mean to. You did, Daniel cut in. You meant every word. The officer motioned for another police car to approach. We'll have to take this seriously, she said. You've damaged this man's property, and this is clearly a case of harassment. You'll need to come down to the station for questioning. The tall man's face turned a shade paler as he realized the gravity of the situation. Wait. This is all a misunderstanding, he protested, but his voice lacked the confidence from earlier. The officer was having none of it. You vandalized his car, and now you need to be held accountable. We'll get the paperwork sorted out. The other members of the entitled group looked at each other, panicked. One of them whispered, We're getting arrested? The officer confirmed it with a nod. The woman who had tried to apologize moments before shook her head in disbelief. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she muttered. The reality of the situation was now setting in for the entitled group. They had crossed the line, and now they would face the consequences. The officer began reading them their rights as backup arrived. Another officer helped Daniel to his car, where he stood watching the scene unfold with a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. With the entitled group being taken away by the police, the atmosphere in the parking lot shifted. The onlookers, who had witnessed the entire confrontation, began to step forward. A middle-aged man approached Daniel first, holding a package of paper towels. Here, the man said quietly, offering the towels. Let me help you clean this up. Daniel looked at him, surprised. Thank you, he said softly. More people came forward, some offering apologies for standing by, others with cleaning supplies to help wash off the egg stains from his car. One woman, who had been watching from a distance, walked over with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, she said, her voice shaking. It wasn't right. Daniel nodded, grateful for the support, though the sting of the earlier insult still lingered. As the last of the eggshells were wiped away, the officer who had initially confronted Daniel approached him once again. I want to personally apologize for what happened, she said, pulling out her wallet. There's a car wash just across the street. Let me cover the cost for you to get your car cleaned properly. Daniel, taken aback by the gesture, shook his head. You don't have to do that. The officer smiled kindly. It's the least I can do. You've been through enough today. With the help of the community and the officer, Daniel's car was soon spotless again. But more than that, the scene had been transformed into one of understanding and support. The entitled group was gone, but in their place was a crowd of strangers who had come together to right a wrong. As Daniel drove away from the grocery store that afternoon, he couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. His anger had subsided, replaced by a sense of calm. He had stood up for himself, shown his strength, and been met with kindness from those who mattered most. And while the confrontation had started with prejudice and judgment, it had ended with humility and justice. The sound of the car wash's high-powered jets faded as Daniel watched the last bit of soap rinse off his car. The officer had insisted on paying for the wash, but even as his car gleamed under the afternoon sun, Daniel couldn't shake the lingering frustration from the encounter earlier. He thanked the attendant and drove home, the soft hum of his car engine doing little to calm his mind. Pulling into his driveway, Daniel noticed the soft glow of the porch light. His wife, Lila, must have known he'd be home soon. After all these years, she still had a way of anticipating his needs before he even knew them himself. With a deep breath, he grabbed the bag of groceries and his medication, stepping out of the car and heading inside. As soon as he opened the front door, the familiar scent of dinner wafted through the air, a comforting blend of spices and home-cooked warmth. Lila appeared from the kitchen, her eyes immediately landing on his tired expression. You're late, Danny, she said, her voice light but concerned. Everything okay? Daniel forced a small smile, but Lila knew him too well. She walked over, gently taking the grocery bag from his hand and setting it aside. Talk to me, she urged softly. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Something happened at the store today. Some people, they accused me of faking my disability. His voice was calm, but the bitterness lingered. They vandalized the car while I was inside, and then they called the cops on me. Lila's face fell, her hand instinctively reaching for his. Oh, Danny, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine, he replied, though the words felt hollow. It was just frustrating, embarrassing. I didn't deserve that, but what could I do? I showed them my prosthetic, and the cops realized I was telling the truth, but still. His voice trailed off, the weight of the day still pressing on him. Leela squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry. People can be so cruel sometimes. I know, he muttered, his eyes downcast. But the police did arrest them for vandalizing my car. It's not like they got away with it. Lila gave him a soft smile. Well, that's something. Daniel sank into the couch, the day's events still swirling in his mind. As much as he wanted to move on, the injustice of it all clung to him like a shadow. Lila sat down beside him, resting her head on his shoulder in quiet support. Without much thought, Daniel turned on the TV, hoping for a distraction. But the moment the screen lit up, his heart nearly skipped a beat. There, on the local news channel, was footage of the incident in the parking lot. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation on their phone, and now the video had gone viral. The news anchor's voice echoed through the living room. Tonight's top story. A black veteran, who was wrongfully accused of faking his disability, stands his ground against a group of individuals who vandalized his car. The footage has garnered millions of views online, sparking conversations about the treatment of veterans and disabled individuals. Lila gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my goodness, Danny, you're on the news. Daniel stared at the screen in disbelief. The footage showed him calmly confronting the entitled group, revealing his prosthetic leg and the subsequent arrest of the vandals. But what shocked him even more was the next part of the news segment. The anchor continued. In response to the incident, the grocery store owner has come forward with a public statement expressing his disappointment in the actions of those involved. He has announced that, in addition to pressing charges against the vandals, he will be giving the veteran a $10,000 check as a gesture of gratitude, not just for what he went through today, but for his service to this country. The screen cut to a pre-recorded video of the store owner, his face stern but compassionate. What I saw in that video was disgusting, the owner said. No one should be treated that way, especially not someone who's sacrificed so much for our country. To make things right, I'm offering a $10,000 check to this man as a small token of appreciation for his service and as an apology for what he endured today. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He turned to Lila, who looked just as shocked as he was. Danny, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. They're giving you $10,000, can you believe it? Daniel shook his head slowly, still processing the news. I don't know what to say. For the first time that evening, the heaviness in his chest began to lift. Knowing that the store owner, and so many others, recognized what he had been through, brought a sense of validation. The sting of the day's events began to fade, replaced by a deep feeling of relief. Justice had been served, and in the end, there were still people out there who cared, people who understood the value of kindness and respect. As the news segment ended, Daniel leaned back on the couch, letting out a long, slow breath. Lila reached over, placing her hand gently on his chest. You did good today, she said softly. You stood your ground, and now the world knows the truth. He nodded, feeling the tension finally slip away. Yeah, he murmured. I guess I did. Together, they sat in the quiet of their living room, the TV now turned off, and the weight of the day slowly giving way to peace. Though the confrontation had shaken him, Daniel now knew that there were still good people in the world, people who would stand by his side, even when the odds were stacked against him. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of his home and the love of his wife, Daniel knew that he wasn't alone. As the evening darkened and the stars appeared in the night sky, Daniel whispered to himself, maybe, after all this, things are going to be okay. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Daniel's story is a powerful reminder that patience, courage, and the truth will always prevail, even in the face of ignorance. We hope this tale of quiet strength has left you feeling inspired to stand tall in moments of adversity and never let others define your worth. If this story moved you, leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell to stay updated with more powerful stories from Hopeful Horizon. We'll be back soon with more narratives that inspire, uplift, and challenge the way we see the world. Stay hopeful, stay strong, and always choose empathy over judgment.